like to invite the first panel up, and we'll get things rolling. As they're moving up, I will give you a high-level introduction of each, and then I'll hand it over. I've already mentioned that Warren Cormier, Executive Director of DCIIA's Retirement Research Center, will be moderating. Joining him will be Jack VanDerhei. I think everybody here knows Jack, Director of Research for EBRI. Jana Baressi from Walmart. She's the Senior Director of their Federal Government Affairs. We'll talk a little bit about what Walmart's up to in the financial wellness space. And then Irene Skricki, she's the Senior Financial Education Program Analyst for BCFP. So, Warren, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So, one of the first things we want to talk about before I introduce the panel is just what the heck is financial wellness. As Michael was saying, you have as many definitions as you have people. So let's see if how do I get to my slides? Do I keep going? There we are. Behavior wellness, first of all, is not a demographic. It's a psychographic. It's measured with psychographic type questions, and it can be measured. And with the presentation today is going to talk about measurements. But it's a person's relationship with money, how they think about it, how they act around it, how they behave when they with what they have. And what we know is that it's not about how much money you have, although there is a correlation. People with more money tend to have higher financial wellness scores. However, two people with the same financial resources can have very different financial well-being. And so it's not, measurements of resources is not a reliable indicator. As a matter of fact, you might even argue that when you talk about retirement readiness, there should be a factor that says, well, here's what you have. Typically, we look at how much money have you accumulated by what age, but I would suggest that there should be a factor that says, now let's modify that by their financial wellness score. But they can't have a very different standard of living. And so I oftentimes hear people say, well, I don't know if I want to measure my employees' financial wellness and tell them about it because they might ask me for more money to make it more. Well, the idea of giving people more money to improve their financial wellness is not a good strategy. As a matter of fact, all you will end up with is a lot wealthier people making the same bad decisions. So it's about the core of what you do and how you think and how you behave, not typically how much money you have. So when you think about what drives financial wellness, you have to look at what behaviorally what people really crave in life, and that applies to financial wellness also and money. People want control. They want to know that they are in charge, that they have something to do with their outcome. They want predictability. They don't like the idea that anything could happen tomorrow and suddenly I will be in chaos. They like safety related to that idea of predictability, but that what I'm doing is safe. They also want access. That is, they want things to happen immediately if they want their money, or that at least they know when they'll be able to get it. And they want freedom. Freedom is kind of two things. I'm sure you've heard this before, freedom to and freedom from. Freedom to, for example, within the context of financial wellness, is I can make, an example of it is I can make a decision regarding my career that doesn't have to only be related to what maximizes my income. That I can take a different, a lower pay, but do what I feel is right for my career. And then freedom from is freedom from fear, freedom from stress, that something could go horribly wrong. So I wanted to talk a little bit about today about the saving at work for a rainy day. I recently worked with Catherine Harvey and David John on a study, a national study on the rainy day savings account. And although this did kind of wade into the issue of financial wellness, it was not primarily about financial wellness, but we saw some things that have to do, I think, are relevant today. By the way, let me just read to you the description of the concept. To help you be prepared for emergencies or unexpected expenses, an amount of money you specify will be deducted from each of your paychecks and deposited into a special savings account set up at a bank or other financial institutions. These transfers from your paychecks and your saving account will continue as long as you would like, and you can stop them any time. You are free to take the money out of the savings account at any time without paying a penalty. There are no fees in this account, no time. At no time is your account information shared. So the study was not about measuring the demand, the specific point estimate of demand, how many people would do this, because that has to do with so many other things, how the plan sponsor, if they decided to do it, markets it, how positive they are about it, or how negative about it. But we did see that a third said they'd be very likely to enroll in this type of program. Again, this is survey, what would you do type thing. An online survey, and then about the same amount said they'd be somewhat likely to do it. So 71% say, I'm leaning in that direction. So we did multivariate analysis to figure out, why would you do that? Why are you leaning in that direction or leaning toward the negative? So what we found is that about 2/3 of the effect, when we ran all sorts of psychographic and demographic variables in the study, we found that 2/3 of the explained variance, or of the effect, was related to psychographics, not related to demographics. And to get into a couple of those, we asked people, how likely would you be to enroll in emergency savings plan by the amount of non-retirement savings. So this is an example of a demographic that came in, but less than 2,000. If you have less than 2,000 saved in a non-retirement savings account, 82% would be likely to do it. You can see all the way up to 25,000, 52%, but still half said that they would still do it. We found that it was related to stress. People who feel they're very stressed by their financial situation are much more likely, and these are all significant, we only included significant variables, were much more likely than if you were not at all stressed, but still, even if you weren't, half would do it. If you had to pay for an emergency that was 1 month's, it cost 1 month's pay, would it be a crisis or not? You can see that people that are thinking of it as a major crisis or difficult are more likely to do it. So then we asked another question, which was, how would you, among many others, but how would you react to these different messages about and positioning statements about the rainy day account? And I think that's interesting because I think it showed underlying demand, or what drives underlying demand for things that would make them feel better. For example, the most powerful, and we determined these rankings through choice modeling, through what's called max diff. It's a conjoint technique. The most powerful positioning statement was, easily start savings through an account that you control. That was the most powerful thing, that you can start. One is access easy, and you're in control. The second, have money tucked away for emergencies that will relieve some stress. Anything I can do to get the stress level down. Routinely set aside money for unexpected events. Access your savings quickly. Again, the access variable, and it's in your name. So these are the types of things that actually increase somebody's financial wellness. That the more of those things that you have, the more that the higher your financial wellness is. If you don't have those other things I mentioned before, control, safety, those things, every time you remove one of those, you're increasing people's stress. And financial wellness programs, if done correctly, have the capacity to reinforce all those. So I would offer to you that the needles, as we talked about in the brochure, moving the needle, is the needles are those things. That it's, you can't ask somebody how loyal are you. They can tell you the symptoms of loyalty. You can't ask anybody how financially well are you, but we can measure we can measure the symptoms of how financially well you are. And so when you're creating an index, a measurement, and we're going to hear about that today. Irene is going to talk about that. We're going to see that the variables that went into their measurement actually are all psychographic, and that you use demographics to then profile who they are. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn this over to Jack. Let me just get back here. Jack, as you know, is the research director for EBRI, and then I will introduce our other guests as they come out.
Thank you, Warren. It's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like to do is spend a couple minutes reviewing the findings from EBRI's 2018 Employer Financial Wellbeing Survey. We're probably going to be going through the slides relatively quickly, but the issue brief containing all this information is available up on our website if you'd like to check it out. And before I get started, I want to explicitly thank the funders of the EBRI Financial Wellbeing Research Center, as well as Greenwald and Associates, who assisted us with the survey. A couple things I want to accomplish today. First of all, I want to give you a very quick review of the background and the key findings, but then I want to focus on 4 specific topics. First of all, what steps were taken to understand employees' financial well-being needs, at least among our survey respondents? What factors were important to them in measurement of financial well-being initiatives? What considerations did they make to determine whether or not to offer financial well-being, or whether they plan to do financial well-being in the future? And then finally, what were the challenges to the company in offering financial well-being initiatives? When we get done with that, I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about what we're going to be doing for phase 2 of our Financial Wellbeing Research Center in 2019 as we start building out a database of individual firms and financial service providers. So as far as the background, again, this was a 15-minute online survey. We did 250 full-time benefit decision makers. We did this summer. They had to work at a company with at least 500 employees, so we haven't really looked at the small market yet. And they had at least be interested in offering financial wellness programs. They didn't actually have to have one right now, but at least be interested in doing so. Respondents were required to have at least a moderate influence on their company's benefits program and financial wellness offerings, and they were required to hold an executive officer or manager position in HR, compensation, or finance. And as I mentioned earlier, Greenwald and Associates assisted us and administered the survey. Well, the very first thing to keep in mind, and we basically for today's presentation only bifurcated by size. We also have information breaking it out by industry, if you'd like to see that in the issue brief. But basically, among those in our sample, about 3 in 4 of the firms with 10,000 or more employees currently offer financial wellness initiatives, compared to, if you're looking at that light blue part of the bar, only about half of those with less than 10,000 employees in that sample were actually already offering it. We also found that about a quarter of all firms are highly concerned with their employees' financial well-being. We specifically asked them on a 1 to 10 scale, how concerned were you? And we grouped it in such a way that those with 1 to 6 was low concern, 7 to 8 were moderate concern, and 9 to 10 were high concern. That basically was an even split among the 3 different categories. Firms with high concern, as you might expect, are much more likely to currently offer the financial wellness initiatives. We also found found that 4 in 10 of those in the survey considered themselves to be in the pilot stage of offering financial wellness initiatives. And probably a little bit discouraging is we found that only 2 in 10 currently offering financial wellness initiatives consider them to be some kind of a holistic program. So more or less these are still considered in many cases to be almost a one-off situation. We also found that most employers do or would pay for their financial wellness initiatives. And we also found that 45% of employers would solely fund the initiatives, and only 9% of the respondents said the entire cost would be shifted to the employees. We also found that very few firms are using specific financial wellness metrics or assessments to understand their employees' needs. So what we're going to do now is go through a couple of different slides looking at basically how the respondents said they're trying to understand their employees' financial wellness needs. And these first slides are looking at the fact that you have a relatively small percentage that either conducted a financial wellness needs assessment, that's the top 2 bars split out by plan size, and if you look at the same situation for those who created a financial well-being score or metric, again, it's the vast minority of those respondents that would use either of those 2 devices to try to figure out the financial wellness needs of their employees. Well, what about something else? We also looked in the next slide at those who were conducting surveys, and we found that about half of the firms use surveys to try and figure out their employees' financial well-being needs. And as far as focus groups, we found that about 1/3 of the respondents would use focus groups to try to assess their employees' financial wellness needs. And then finally, what about those that did somewhat more of an analytical approach? We found about 2/3 of the firms are examining the data that they already have on hand to do this assessment, while about 1/3 of them are analyzing quantitative data to try to assess the financial needs of their employees. Well, let's move from that to very quickly looking at how the employers, the respondents, said they're going to measure the impact of the financial well-being initiatives. And we asked them basically what are the top 3 factors that either are or will be important in the measurement of your financial wellness initiatives. And probably not too surprising, worker satisfaction and employee stress came out as the top 2 considerations in what they will use to assess whether or not these financial well-being programs are actually doing the jobs that they put them in place for. We also asked them basically what were or will be your top 3 considerations used to determine whether to offer financial wellness benefits to your employees. And we find that there's a number here. First of all, cost was, of course, the most important. Then interest among employees. And then the next 2 use this magic phrase value proposition, which I promise I'll get to in the next slide. We found that about 40% said value proposition to the employees, whereas 27% said it was going to be value proposition to the company. So we changed that into an open-ended question to try and figure out what they were referring to, and you can see there's not a lot of consensus, especially when you break it out by plan size, on what they mean by a value proposition. If you look at that second one on the left-hand side, though, one of the issues that comes up quite frequently when we have this discussion is it going to be an ROI consideration? Is it going to be something that focuses on return on investment? And surprisingly, for the smallest and the largest, you have a fair percentage of individuals that consider that to be the value proposition. But in the middle part, you find that those with 2,500 to 5,000 employees, that it's not as relevant to them. There's a lot of industry correlation going on here with respect to certain entities as far as those responses are concerned, but overall there does not seem to be an overwhelming desire that ROI be a consideration in whether or not these financial well-being programs will be used. The last slide I want to do to just basically go over some of the results is what are the challenges to the company. And let me just very specifically go through each of these. First of all, when we ask them what are the top 3 challenges your company faces or anticipates facing in offering financial well-being benefits in the workplace, complexity of the program, probably not surprisingly, comes in first. Then lack of staff resources to coordinate or market the benefits, lack of interest among the employees, and challenges in making the business case to management and to justify the cost. Now, the one that I've got highlighted in red, lack of ability or data to quantify the value added of the initiative, is basically what I'm going to get to in the next slide as we talk about phase 2. But I think a case could be made that in many cases, those 4 top choices as far as their challenges to the company all could be at least partially alleviated with better data, better analytics for the employer in making those decisions. So what I'd like to spend my remaining 2 minutes on before Warren gives me the hook here is what we're going to do for phase 2 of the EBRI Financial Wellbeing Research Center research agenda for 2019. We have been reaching out to a number of financial service providers as well as a number of employers to try to get information that we could actually use to make quantitative analytical assessments of the effectiveness of this. Basically, what we're doing is we're working primarily with employers to get information on what types of financial well-being initiatives they've had, when they were put in place, and working with the employers and or their consultants get at least flags for the employees to find out which of these employees have actually used those initiatives. Then we will basically be combining that with information that they're providing us in large part on their 401k participants, so we can find out, at least at the first phase, what the impact of many of these programs has on participation decisions, contribution decisions, asset allocation decisions, and probably most importantly, loan activity and hardship withdrawals. After we have that information, many of the employers have indicated at least a willingness to also give us HR information so we can go back and use the same kind of hashing technique. We never get personally identifiable information. We never get a social security number, we never get a name, we never get an address, but basically using a procedure similar to what we're using on our 401k database, we will then basically be able to hash that in to find out information, and many times they want us to analyze absenteeism and some kind of productivity measures. That's what we're trying to establish as an overall common denominator among all the sponsors that are in the database. And then, as you might expect, a lot of the employers have more or less one-off things that they'd like us to look at in addition to that. So this is something that hopefully by the next policy forum in May, we'll actually have the results available and can come back and try and provide some quantitative analytics as far as the overall effectiveness, not only for the program, but most importantly, broken out by demographics. So we'll look at it by age, we'll look at it by wage, we'll look at it by tenure, and hopefully be able to provide some sort of at least first blush at where we're going to be going as we build out this Financial Wellbeing Research Center database. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'm going to have Irene Skricki take the podium, or you can speak from here if you'd like. Irene is the Senior Financial Education Program Analyst for the Office of Financial Education in the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection. And she's going to talk about another research piece that they call the Pathway to Financial Wellness, and I'll let you explain.
Great. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. I brought all my glasses so I can decide who and what to see at what time. At some point, I've got to make the transition to bifocals, but not yet. So I'm Irene Skricki. Those of you who saw the agenda previously note I am not Jana Ratcliffe, although we each have difficult to pronounce names. She had a family health emergency. I work in her office, and we'll be talking about our financial well-being work. So first, I'll just say, I'm with the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection, so a federal agency that regulates the consumer financial product marketplace and also helps to educate and inform consumers around financial decision-making, and it's in that latter part, of course, that we are talking about financial well-being. And as a government employee, I have to do the giant disclosure you see up here. This presentation is being made by a BCFP representative, but it doesn't constitute legal interpretation, guidance, or advice, and the presenter, the views may be only mine and not those of the Bureau. So the title of this session is How Do Financial Wellness Initiatives Move the Dial? And of course, to address that question, you need to know what the dial is. How can we measure the impact of these efforts? We need some way to do that. And that came up, obviously, in what Warren said earlier. And to use a business-oriented term, we think what we all want to know is the return on investment for financial wellness efforts. And to measure that, you're going to need some way to measure the impact. And as you probably all know, it's a lot harder than it sounds. Again, that theme already came up because there's no single financial outcome or goal that all your employees or plan members are trying to achieve. It would be much easier if everyone you were working with had the same goal, say of having $500 emergency fund. Well, then you could measure that, though even that's actually not as easy to measure as it might sound. But that's not the reality we live in. Everyone is trying to do different things. They have different goals. And we really face that same issue for those of us who work in the field of financial education, which is my background. We had that same challenge. It isn't clear how to measure what financial education was accomplishing for the same reason that every program or effort had different goals, it had different interventions, was serving different populations with different goals. And that was really one of the impetus for the Bureau to originally create a financial well-being definition and way to measure it. It's financial well-being, that's the term we use instead of wellness. They, loosely, again, you said there's multiple definitions, but when we talk about well-being, it's really the ultimate goal of financial education or employee financial wellness is really about something that all your interventions are leading to, no matter what the person's goal is. So that it's a subjective concept, and it's somewhat unique to each person. It's how does that person feel about their financial situation and whether they're achieving their own goals. But it also needs to be comparable across people. So we underwent a process to come up with a definition. Some of you may have heard this before. Others from the Bureau, I think, have come to some of these EBRI events in the past, so you may be familiar with it. But I'm now ready to move the slide forward, if I can figure out how. Clicker? Yes. Right arrow. Whoa! So the Bureau several years ago did a process to come up with a definition of talking to consumers, educators, looking at research, whatnot. And so this is a consumer-derived definition of financial well-being. And what it really is 4 parts. It's control over your day-to-day, month-to-month finances, capacity to absorb a financial shock, financial freedom to make the choices to enjoy life, and being on track to meet your financial goals. And we've grouped those here into these nice, clever little boxes. It's really about security and freedom of choice in the present and the future. Is how you can think about that. So control over your day-to-day finances is security in the present and whatnot. And if you think about it, this definition can be used in many ways, but it certainly links to, you can see how workplace financial education or efforts can link to a number of these. Certainly, being on track to meet your financial goals. If retirement is a goal, that's something that employers are going to have a big stake in. Control over your day-to-day, month-to-month finances. If it's where your paycheck comes from, you have an interest, or there is a connection between, direct deposit, access to good financial services, access to savings opportunities. So hopefully this definition resonates across a number of different places and efforts. So again, how this definition plays out for any one person is going to vary depending on that person's situations, goals, choices. So that's nice, great, nice definition. Maybe you like it. What are you going to do with that? We need to know how to measure it. And again, this sort of came up earlier, but as an employer, you or a plan sponsor, you have access to a lot of data. Income, tax and withholding, status, healthcare benefits enrollment, all kinds of different things related to someone's financial status. But those numbers alone, again, don't capture that subjective sense of where of where someone is in their kind of financial journey. And so we developed a tool to measure financial well-being, that definition you saw on the previous slide. It is a scale, which is some questions that translate into a single number. That is the financial well-being scale. Let's see. So again, since no single data element can really capture how people feel about their money situation, we have this new scale. It's now a couple years old that will help you measure it. The scale is really designed to let practitioners, researchers, anyone who wants to use it to consistently and accurately quantify something that's not directly observable. And I'll note the scale it's a public resource. It's free and openly available to anybody who wants to use it. We went through a rigorous process to develop this scale, testing with like 13,000 people and all kinds of fancy research techniques that I won't go into to come up with what are sort of 10 deceptively simple questions. I'll read a couple of them. I could handle a major unexpected expense. Does that describe me completely, very well, somewhat? I am securing my financial future. I can enjoy life because of the way I'm managing my money. My personal favorite, giving a gift for a wedding, birthday, or other occasion would put a strain on my finances for each month. If you look at those questions, you can see that they each relate in a different way to those four concepts about control, in the security, control of your day-to-day finances, your financial future. And note that they don't ask any numbers. They don't ask how much money do you make, what's your credit score, what's your savings, what's your debt. It's how you feel about those things. But people actually know their own situation. Again, this has been tested quite rigorously. So you take this, you get a number between 0 and 100, and that is your financial well-being score. I'm going to jump over this to say, so this scale has been out for a couple years. There's a number of things that you can do with it. You can assess someone initially when they come in, if you're an educator or an employer or really anybody who wants to use this. You can track individual progress over time to see how people's well-being is moving. You could use it to assess your own kind of benefits offerings and your communications. Are people responding to different things that you're putting out? And of course, financial well-being survey research is one of the big uses that other researchers are using this for. In the employer context, I'll go back here. Again, you could use it, or a plan sponsor, you could use it to really better understand the people you're serving. It can provide data to assess your benefit strategy. It can help your organization identify needs or opportunities and adjust your products and services. And of course, measuring how scores change over time. So that's the well-being, and I'll just say a couple things. So one value to this scale, in addition to the fact that it's been kind of researched and validated and all those research terms, is that we did do a national survey, so we have nationally representative data, so we know a fair amount of the state of financial well-being in America. The answer is 54. That's simple. All you need to know, 54. We had actually set the scale to have the median be around 50. But you can see, if you know what histogram is, it shows that it is a normal distribution. About a third of Americans kind of fall in the middle, between 50 and 60, about a third below 50, about a third above 60. And we have more detailed benchmarking data, but essentially below 50, you're really struggling to make ends meet regularly. Above 60, you're generally doing pretty well and not struggling month to month. And in the middle, it's kind of more mixed bag. So we have much more detailed information about different segments, how different things connect to financial well-being, all in lengthy data reports we won't go into now. But again, if you do use this scale in your own work, the nice thing is that there's a body of national research, so you can kind of see where the people you're working with actually, how they fit into kind of a bigger picture. So you can say, well, great, this is nice. Maybe I'm convinced now. It's a nice tool. Sure, maybe we'll use it, but we're trying to talk about what can move the needle, what could actually impact financial well-being and improve it. So do we have anything to say on that? Why, yes, we do. That's why I'm here. Clicker. We took this data, again, this large national survey that asked the well-being questions, but also a number of other demographic, income, financial experiences, financial stress, financial confidence, and we did some research on that, and this is what we found. I love this slide because, like, the researchers lean forward. They're like, "Oh, look at that! I see model fit," and everyone else leans back. Don't worry, I won't actually speak about this. What we found was a pathway, and the more, again, for the researchers, this is all available should you want to study all these little things. But what we did was we held constant, income, demographics, all the kind of things that were that do have an impact on well-being, to see, again, for someone of the same income, the same profile generally, if they have different well-being, what is it that's different? Because if their income is the same, it's not about income. If their background and socioeconomic status is the same, that's not the cause either. And so the simplified version of this kind of scary diagram is 4 simple boxes. Now, this anyone can understand. What we found is that financial skill leads to financial behavior. The financial behavior leads to different financial situation, the objective facts of your financial life leading to financial well-being. It sounds kind of like, well, that sounds like, all right, that's fine. But notice the things that aren't here. So knowledge falls out of the equation when you control for other things. So what really matters, knowledge is important, and it's wrapped up in some of these other things too. But financial skill is what really jumped out. And what we define, financial skill is defined as knowing how to find information. So you don't need to know all the details of your retirement plan or of compound interest or bank products. You need to know how to find it. You need to know how to apply it, process it, and apply it to your situation. And you need to know how to execute on it. It's a 3-part definition of skill. So it's really knowing how to do something rather than knowing all the facts about it. And it's true, right? How many of us really know all the facts? We just know we know the trusted sources, we know who to ask, we know how to get to the information. And so, again, knowledge is important, and we also found financial confidence and self-efficacy is very important. But financial skill was the thing that really jumped out when we counted for everything else. And the nice thing is that is something that financial educators, that employers, that plan sponsors, that others can have an impact on. It's something that you can help people with. You can teach financial skill. Now, this is all fairly new. We just released this a couple months ago. So we're still exploring financial skill. What does it mean? How does it get implemented? So hopefully we'll have more to say, and we'd love to learn more from everyone who's working on these issues as well over time. But it is something we think that can have an impact, and certainly in the employer context or the plan sponsor context. I think you think about open enrollment, signing up for benefits, things like that. Think about how you could better help people manage that information, make good decisions, find good information, compare it, connecting people to financial advisors through EAP. There's any of a number of things that could kind of build on this financial skill concept, I think, in the areas that all of you are working. So this is kind of, after many years of work, these 4 boxes sum up our entire financial well-being work. And so, to summarize, hopefully the scale may be something you want to use. I can answer, we have lots of more information. We have reports on all this. I'm happy to say more, but the short message is scale may be something to use to measure your impact, and financial skill may be the intervention or the concept that you want to kind of infuse into your work to increase financial well-being. I will stop there.
Okay. Thank you. For Q&A after all the presentations, I want to have Jana Baressi of Walmart take the, actually, I'm starting to speak right from here. So we've had 2 presentations on research regarding financial wellness. Jana is now going to talk about more of an experience with programs. She's going to focus on what they learned about financial wellness based on 2 things. Their experience in the consumer-facing financial services business, and also through a program that they are running with their associates using an app called Even. And so, Jana, can you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to speak from here, and I don't have slides. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. So as Warren said, I'm Jana Baressi. I work on the federal government affairs team for Walmart here in Washington, D.C., but I've supported and worked closely with our consumer-facing financial services team and our employee benefits team, particularly in the area of financial innovation and opportunities for both audiences to kind of find new and different ways to both access financial services and enhance opportunities for savings. So just a few quick stats on Walmart. Many of you may know this, but we're the largest private sector employer in the United States. We have about 1.5 million employees in the United States, about 5,000 stores around the country, home office, corporate headquarters, still in Bentonville, Arkansas, where Sam Walton founded the company over 50 years ago. But we do have some growing technology operations in California and San Bruno, in Hoboken, New Jersey, Austin and Dallas, Texas, and Reston, Virginia as well. So kind of the traditional retail business, but also a growing kind of e-commerce business as well. About 140 million people shop in our stores or visit our website every single week. So we obviously touch in some way many, many Americans sort of across all spectrums. It really is a reflection of the country, our customer base. So one thing I want to talk about too that I think is important in framing this up, and was thinking about this as the other folks were talking. So as we think about our employee base, we've done a really increasingly deliberate focus over the past couple years in investing in stability and mobility for our associates. And so what that means is a couple things. One, a few years ago, we announced a targeted $2.7 billion investment in wages and training for associates. We kind of built on that earlier this year, and as part of that, that included expanding paid leave to our full-time hourly associates. We are a bit unique in retail in that we have a majority full-time workforce, but a large chunk of the workforce is in the hourly space. And one of the other things that we've done a lot of work around is scheduling. So as we think about sort of the stresses for families, a lot of that relates to managing things like childcare, right? And so giving people good visibility into their schedules and what shifts they'll be working, in our case, at least 2 weeks in advance. And so I think those are important things that we've done to sort of address some of these issues as well. On the mobility side, part of that is some of our in-house training. So we've got a big program called Walmart Academies. We've put about 400,000 associates through that program just this year. And so part of that is upskilling associates and sort of giving them more visibility into the pathways for them in terms of career development. And we also rolled out a new college benefit program, so an associate can pursue college basically debt-free, so at the cost of $1 a day for them. So again, thinking about sort of the environment that they're working in and sort of creating those opportunities for stability and mobility. So to speak to our consumer-facing financial services business, so we are not a bank, we don't have a bank. Sort of what we do is provide access points with partners for consumers that are unbanked, underbanked, or in some cases unhappily banked. That happens more than you think. And so there are a lot of ways that we can do that, but really our sort of guiding principle is transparent fee structures, so no surprises for consumers. And we do that in a lot of different ways. So we've got a prepaid card product. We do some checking account alternative products with Amex and Green Dot, which is also our prepaid card administrator. We do check cashing, but we do it at a flat fee. So you may know a lot in the check cashing industry, a lot of times it's a percentage of the face value of the check. And so we do that at a flat fee to save consumers money. We've also driven down prices significantly on money transfers. We have bill pay services. So again, all of that for our consumer that may not be able to readily access the traditional banking system. It gives them options to access financial services in a way that they can manage, and that's much more price transparent for them. They're not getting hit with unexpected fees. One cool innovation that we did in our money card product, and we worked really closely with Green Dot, who's the card administrator, and Commonwealth, which is an organization that's done a lot of research on savings and how to incentivize savings particularly related to gamification. And so with the Savings Vault, what we did is create actually a prize-linked savings program. So it sort of taps into the psychology of lottery, but without the downside. And so basically, each dollar that a cardholder puts into the Savings Vault each month enters them into a sweepstakes drawing. And so we do a number of cash prizes each month. There's one $1,000 prize each month. And since the inception of that program, we've actually had about $1 billion that has come through the vault. And again, so the way that it works kind of functionally in the card is that you take that money kind of out of your primary transaction account, you set it aside in the vault, but you can move it back anytime. But the goal is to create those incentives for short-term kind of incremental savings, because as we, as a lot of us know, the statistic that 44% of Americans, couldn't address a financial emergency without borrowing or selling something, it sort of gets at those short-term sort of incremental savings needs. So that's one of the cool innovations that we've done on the consumer-facing side of the financial services business. So in terms of the Even app, this is a really cool innovation. It's actually been out now to our associates for almost exactly a year. And it's a financial management tool, and so it's delivered via an app. And what it does is, so the associate through Even connects their primary transaction account, and the app learns based on bills that are coming in and or money coming in and bills that are going out, what the okay to spend balance is. So when you go to the app, the balance you see is not your balance, it's the okay to spend balance. And so that tells you, based on, you may have rent coming or whatever, here's what you have for discretionary income. What's really cool, and this is, I think, a fascinating technology unlock, because when you think about it, the way we all get paid is really antiquated, right? It's, biweekly. House staffers on Capitol Hill still get paid once a month. So it's an antiquated way based on, when it was really expensive to, cut a lot of checks. If life happens for an associate and they need to meet a financial need, and to help them avoid falling into maybe an overdraft fee or a late fee situation, the app allows them to pull forward a portion of their earned wages. So it's not a loan, it's wages that they have earned in their own pay period. But what they can do is trigger what's called an InstaPay. And I think they can get about up to 50% of their wages, so not the whole thing, but a portion of it. And the average, so what's interesting too is we're seeing use of this across both the hourly and salaried universe of associates. The average InstaPay is about $170. And just to step back kind of one moment on Even generally, we have about, since the inception a year ago, about 300,000 active users of the app. 45% of people are going to it every single day of those active users, and about 80% are using it every week. So really good kind of usage. And again, the goal was, how do we help give people tools that allow them to avoid some of the situations where they might be facing additional fees or cost because of the timing of when they're getting paid, not because of the money that they're going to get, because of the timing of it. So in some of the early research, we found a couple interesting things. Most notably, we found, and this is Even's research, that per InstaPay, associates are saving $24 in bank fees. We have found that incidence of reliance on payday loans has decreased. And this is very early, but directionally, we actually think it's helping minimize turnover, because one of the challenges for some new associates is that depending on the timing of when they start, it can be a while before they get paid. And so this is helping to bridge that gap. So again, that's sort of early, and we think we're seeing that, and more research to come on that. So just a few examples of, I think, some interesting practical applications of where we're focused on different types of incentives and services for both our customers and our associates to address some of these short-term financial challenges, with the hope of, if you help people work through some of those, then there's more opportunity to talk to them about potentially what longer-term savings options and financial tools might look like for them. So, thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Time for question and answer. Yes.
Tim, if you could come, Tim, could you come to a mic because we've got people on the live screen. Sure. Thank you.
Thanks for setting this up. Jana, I had a question for you. When it came to offering your employees these benefits, did management have any concerns about the fiduciary role that they'd be playing in offering these particular products and services to your employees?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that it was sort of seen as a tool that we could provide, and sort of addressing some of the stresses and challenges that we talk about in terms of when and how people can access their own wages. And so really I think it was kind of the technology unlock in a way, and getting to an understanding that it was possible to do it, right? And I know it's something that our financial services leadership has been thinking about for a long time. And so I think we thought, it's one thing to bring that sort of out to the market in a consumer-facing way, but we're the biggest employer, and so the best thing we could try to do is try to do it and figure it out on our own. So.
Other questions?
Irene, this slide, glad this slide is still up here, resonates with me. I mean, our experience is the education is good, but the education doesn't lead to the behavior change. So can you comment a little bit more about the skill aspect and maybe other research and work you're going to do to get underneath that?
Sure, and if you like this slide, I can put up the more complicated one too, that might make you feel better. Yeah, so one of the things I didn't mention is we measured financial skill. So you might say, well, how did you actually figure out financial skill? We actually put out with the report, and there's reports, the Pathways report here. I have one copy, so if anybody wants them, they're all online. But we also came up with a financial skill scale, which is we haven't been promoting as much because it's newer and we don't know as much about how it's going to play out kind of in practice. But this research is pretty new, so we're just trying to figure out what the financial skill concept will look like in practice. We do want to gather from practitioners. I work more with the financial education field. I have colleagues, including Ken sitting back there, who works more with employers in the workplace context. And I think we want to be trying to understand from people out there how this will actually play out. So we don't have all the answers yet on financial skill, other than we know that it matters. We have a definition. We have some questions you can ask to determine someone's financial skill. But we're still, even with the well-being scale, we're still in phase of understanding what is a meaningful change, how do we make that kind of change. So it may be too early for us to have any definitive answers on skill, other than to say we've got a definition for it, we have a way to measure it, we have some initial ideas on how you could implement, but it's early to say here's the exact 5 things that you should be doing to build financial skill. What I would like is to come back in a year and have you tell me what worked out, in the work that all of you are doing around financial skill. So.
All right. Other questions?
Jana, this is a great presentation. Actually, everybody's great presentation. But Jana, your specifics, Tom Johnson Retirement Clearinghouse, if I'm supposed to declare. I'm interested in your did the first presenter's information resonate with you and remind you or inform your activities, or are they sort of putting you on the spot in that regard, but be interested in your comment.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we, in particular, have learned a lot from, as I alluded to, the consumer-facing financial services business, right? And where the pressure points are for people to sort of, one, access the financial services marketplace, right? I mean, for a lot of people, there are, significant barriers to entry, and then it becomes very costly for them to be in that system, right? And so, some of the things we're not going to be able to solve entirely, but where are the places where we can, use our scale and our ability to partner with, knowledgeable players in the space to drive access, price transparency. One of the things I would say too is, we forget sometimes, but there are a lot of people that still kind of operate in cash, right? And so some of the services we provide are simply to help people access the digital economy with cash. So that's loading prepaid cards. In fact, we just announced a program with PayPal where you can cash load into your PayPal account from a Walmart register. And so, yeah, I think it all resonates, but sort of where we're sitting is sort of in the practical application of it, and what are the things that we can do both as an employer, but also a retail business that wants to, look, if people can save money on fees, that's good for us. Like, that's more groceries they can buy, right? And so I think we're constantly thinking creatively about innovations and partnerships that can help us do that. So.
We had another question right here.
Yeah, I was wondering, for the researchers, to what extent are you now at the point where you can build on other folks' research to bring us to a kind of a cohesive idea of what is retirement financial education and how does it impact behavior? Are you able to build on each other's research yet, and do you think there's any emerging theories coming, or is it just still so early that it's a lot of original research?
So we have done extensive quantitative research on the effect of financial literacy on behavior, and we found that the impact, these are our studies, has been, now we're all for financial education, more knowledge, et cetera, but I think someone mentioned earlier, I think you'd mentioned, or somebody mentioned that the knowledge factor is not very powerful in actually affecting behavior. That, you tell people if you smoke cigarettes, you'll get cancer, yet people continue. And finally, we price them out of the market. That was the only way to get them to stop, not through education. So, so we have done that type of research, and we'll be doing some more on that. But we find that actually people, what people think they know is more powerful in affecting behavior than what they actually know. That is, if they think they know a lot, they are more free, or they are freer to take an action. So it's a obviously a very complicated topic, but yeah, so we are looking at that.
I'll actually jump in here as well. The Bureau has another kind of signature effort or publication called the Principles for Effective Financial Education, and it applies to any financial education, not just retirement-based, but again, a report that we have online where we found, looking at across lots of evaluations of rigorous evaluations of effective financial education programs, there are kind of 5 factors. The first was to know your customer, so to really customize it to the person, not just give a one-size-fits-all. The second was to provide timely and relevant information. So information matters, but right, it has to be at the time when the person needs it. I mean, again, these feel intuitively obvious, but surprisingly, I think not all programs do this all the time. So the timely, relevant information. The third was to build financial skill, actually, which actually came out before we did this study, but helping people to build the skills that will help them. The fourth was to build on motivation, so to really understand how to help people, find out what motivates them, persevere, stick with it, have plans if things, plan of action if things go wrong in their financial kind of trajectory. And then the fourth was to make it easy to make to make the right decision and act on it. And that's really kind of decision context, behavioral economics type stuff and that's where employers, plan sponsors have an incredible ability to make the decision context work for people, make it easier for people, right? The classic opt-in versus opt-out or auto-enroll for retirement. So thinking about the context in which a person is making a decision and either fixing it if you control the context or helping the consumer to navigate that, to understand, gee, I could sign up for reminders, I could sign up for things that will help me make the decision easier. So those 5 principles, I think, are characteristics of good financial education programs. Generally, you'd have to think through how it applies specifically to retirement, but that would be my kind of suggestion of how to think about retirement education or retirement programs.
Thank you. We are out of time.